All right, let's go. Episode 1, right here with my good friend, client, Marko.
Thanks, Ed. Dude, we've been talking about doing this for some time.
No, definitely.
Or at the very least, it's been on our minds as a possibility. Because every time I come in to get my hair cut by this man, we just have hour-long conversations and they go a million directions. But we tend to hit on a few themes, and we just both felt like it would be cool to throw together an episode of us chatting and at least have it for longevity and but also maybe make it a more regular thing. So we're gonna see how it goes.
Yeah, so this is episode 1. It started off as an idea, going back on what he was saying. We have really great conversations when he's getting a haircut. We talk about some really interesting topics that I feel like a lot of people can definitely benefit from the conversations that we have. They're very meaningful, very inspirational, and very, it gets you going. It gets you
Exactly.
you excited about life and the future, and just how, in general, life is just very beautiful, right? Constantly learning new things. So let's give them a little introduction of how we met or how you came to become my client.
Sure. Well, I've lived in the Bay Area for majority of my life, and went to school at Santa Clara. I used to get my hair cut at a little barbershop out there called Sam & Roy's. I never particularly connected with the barbers. There were a few of them. I don't even think I ever really had like a particular barber I sought out there. I would just go in, get my hair cut, whatever. Didn't think about it too much. And then over time, I kind of started to feel like my hair wasn't looking the way that I wanted to look more often than not when I would go there. And actually it was also further from where I started living after school. And my friend Christian, who I was living with at the time, told me about Ed. I don't know how he found you. He probably just did some Google searching.
Yeah, he found me on Booksy randomly.
Well, he's a lot more choosy and picky in general about his appearance, and like he puts more thought into that. So he told me that Ed was an awesome guy. If I wanted like a better barber to go to, I should try. So I came over, and I've been coming to Ed ever since.
So shout out to Christian if you're going to watch this for the recommendation. Yeah, it was I had a great conversation with Christian when I met him, and he was also telling me, he's like, hey man, I'm gonna bring my roommates over. I think you'll vibe with them for sure. And he was actually talking to me about you. He's like, you remind me so much of my roommate Marko. You guys are almost in the same kind of mindset. And I was like, yeah man, bring him on. And that's how we met. And I remember the first time you sat here, we right off the bat, it just, how you can always tell, like, okay, this guy, he knows a lot. And so that's when I started asking you questions. And I remember you told me about your little micro dose hike, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, that sounds really cool. And I remember I was actually up to do it, right? And I remember you invited me the first time. I remember the first time I didn't bother because I remember you had told me that you were doing these hikes at Rancho San Antonio, right? So then I remember when you sent me the address, I didn't even bother to see if it was Rancho San Antonio again. I just kind of figured, right?
Sure.
And I remember I ended up going to Rancho San Antonio, and I was like, hey, where you at, man? You're like, dude, we're over here at the Almaden one. I was like, no way. And I remember
you didn't read the address?
No, I didn't, because I thought it was at the San Antonio. I just kind of,
remember.
So then I remember I gassed it to Almaden, and then that was a really cool experience. So yeah, I kind of wanted you to share how'd you get into that microdosing hiking, for those of you that don't know what would you call that niche? What would you call it? Like?
Sure. Well, there's microdosing, particularly magic mushrooms, and then there is this group that I got involved with over a year ago as just a hiker. They started out in Oakland. A guy named Seth and his partner Jeff just started deciding, like, hey, we believe mushrooms can help people. We grow mushrooms, and sure, like we might want to sell them at some point, but really we're interested in getting mushrooms into the hands of more people and like helping people see that actually this can be really useful for things like anxiety and depression. And they wanted to kind of build a little community around it, so they just decided to start hosting hikes, bringing free capsules for people to try if they were interested or if they weren't. And ultimately, if people weren't going to show up, whatever, at least they still got to hike and have a good time. And they just kind of have been doing that consistently. It's been over 2 years since they started. And when I got involved, I really enjoyed it a lot. I connected with the people. I felt like, the blend of the hike experience and being in nature and having just a little bit of the mushroom tingles that you can get from it was awesome. And it was a nice way to disconnect from my life, which is normally a lot of hours on the computer in my work. So after attending a lot of those hikes and talking to Seth a bit more, he expressed a desire to expand the project outside of just Oakland. And so since I live down in San Jose, I volunteered to start helping out and leading hikes down here. And we've been probably operating for about 8 months. I think we've done 11 hikes or something. And I invited Ed because probably around the time I met you was also when that was just beginning. So you came to one of the first few hikes. It was probably the second one. I think it was the second one. So there were still some kinks to iron out for sure. And but you seem to have a really good time there. And we've kind of stayed with it. And it's grown and it's shrunk and it's kind of growing again. And I'm committed to just keeping the hikes going as long as well. Honestly, as long as I live here, even if people are not coming all the time, it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I got partners that also help me with that project. So, and hiking is just nice. It just feels good. So I would love to see it grow more. There are issues considering the fact that, they started it in Oakland with some confidence since the decrim had already happened there. But in San Jose, it's not exactly the same state. We have to stay fairly underground in that respect. And so we're limited a little bit in how we can publicize it. Mostly it's invite only now. I would love for that to change and maybe it will at some point in the near future. But for now, just kind of holding it down, and I enjoy it. I'm glad that it's in my life, and hope to see you at some more hikes too.
No, definitely. And before I share my experience with the hike and how it kind of helped me and really opened my eyes to a lot of things, right? I want to ask you, how was your first initial experience with that?
With the hiking, or with mushrooms?
With the hiking, like the microdosing hike.
Well, when I first joined the Hikerdose, I think at that time they had Thursday and Saturday hikes, but I was actually attending on Thursdays because I was out of a job at that point. I was looking for a new job, and actually kind of happy to be not working for a little bit, because this was after 2 years that I'd been working for Google, and I was recommended to seek out the Hikerdose after a trip to Jamaica. One of the leaders at a mushroom retreat told me about her relationship with Seth. She knew about this guy out in Oakland, and that was just like how it came to my attention. So I just went out there on my own, and like the dosing for these hikes, for the microdose capsules, it's quite low. It's 50 milligrams to 150 milligrams, 50 milligrams per capsule. We advise people to take 1 to 3. And that's still like considerably within the microdose threshold, where for some people they may or may not perceive that the effects at all. Yeah. Especially if they've never done it before. They don't even know what to feel or what to, so. But I had experience with mushrooms before that, and really it kind of helped me get a little bit through this period of uncertainty, and just gave me a place to go and people to talk to, and just to really connect and enjoy the natural beauty of the world. And I was driving over an hour, or about an hour, just to go to these hikes, and I kept coming back because it's just good people and good vibes. And so that in and of itself, the experience I had there might have been enough to motivate me to like, start a hike of my own like I'm doing now. But really also my interest in doing so came from a broader interest with the future of something like mushrooms or psychedelics, maybe more broadly. I wanted to get involved in like a productive leadership kind of oriented way, and this sort of just fell into my lap. And it seemed perfect because it wasn't too high commit, it wasn't too risky. Like we could just kind of do it privately and just kind of feel it out and see where it goes. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I do think most people who come to these hikes, they don't know, most people don't know what to expect, especially if they've never done mushrooms before. And most people will comment that they were surprised how much they enjoyed it, because we have a structure to the hikes. It's not just a hike, you know. We do little group sharing activity, and we try to open up space for people to have a little bit of a dialogue. And you know, some of that is led by me, or sometimes it's led by some of my co-facilitators. But it's a blast, and it feels like real, genuine connections with people, even people that, you know, probably people that I wouldn't either meet or normally be spending particularly a lot of time with, because we just come from different, you know, ways of life. But yeah, it's great. Yeah.
And during that time, were you facing some type? I know you said you were facing some type of uncertainty in that time in your life. What did the mushrooms or those hikes do for you when you experienced it? Like, what did you feel? Or what awareness did it open in your life?
Well, specifically, you know, I had something like 4 or 5 what I would call substantial mushroom experiences before that. I had never really microdosed before the hikes. I had taken anywhere between 2 to 4 grams of mushrooms in you know, different occasions, different places, different times. And I feel like I got a lot of benefits from that specifically. That it's hard to say what was the microdose doing for me particularly, because I really think it was more just the communal aspect, just being active, just being in nature, being with other people. That was probably more beneficial for me even than the microdoses themselves, truthfully. There's more to be said on what the effects of like a large mushroom dose might be on your the structure of your brain, or your, you know, your psychological state, whatever. But for sure, I just, it gave me a place to come back to, and just be with other people, and like listen to people and talk to them, and just like, there's something about moving and talking and just being surrounded also by a beautiful scenery that I felt like really calmed my nervous system, and made me more, just generally more optimistic, I guess.
No, definitely.
How I would put it. So yeah.
That's cool, man.
Same for you?
Same for me. So when he invited me to that, you know, I obviously never took any sort of psychedelics or mushrooms in my life. So, you know, so I was open to it, though, for the simple reasons that Marko here was telling me some of the benefits that it was having on people, right? With anxiety, depression, with PTSD, trauma, and I felt for the longest time I've always been very numb to emotion, right? To emotion. I feel like I've grew up, my dad being really mentally tough on me. So I was just like, I wonder if this experience will help me with that, right? Because it was very hard for me in my life to really connect emotionally, right, with people, right? I feel like I was really numb to it. So I didn't know what to expect going into this hike, but it was really a really eye-opening experience, just because, you know, I think I took like 3 capsules, you know. I was like, all right, let me see what.
So 150, which is the highest amount that we suggest people take, but still is nothing extreme.
Yeah, you obviously, you don't start tripping out. You actually don't even feel it. But what I've experienced was that, in a way, it broadened my awareness, right? It broadens your awareness, and it allows you to see a lot of things in different perspectives. And what is funny, though, is the time that I actually went there, I never even talked about myself. I was listening to everybody's story there, you know. So it was like everyone was coming to me and just telling me their traumas, their PTSDs, like their life stories of why they're the way they are, why they have anxiety, why they have depression, or certain things, why they can't move on, and it was really eye-opening. I was like, whoa. I was like, okay, like I thought I had problems, but in reality, like, my problems are not problems compared to a lot of the things that were being told to me. But at the end, it didn't really hit me until at the end, after we said goodbye to everybody. I was in the car, I was driving, and then just out of nowhere, I just started crying, man. I just started bawling my eyes out, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, what the hell is going on, man? I felt like, I don't know, maybe the awareness or something, like, but I just started to feel. I felt like, I was like, whoa. I was like, dude, this is crazy. Like, all this emotion just started coming out of me, and I was just crying on my way home, and I know people were looking at me on the stop signs or the red lights like, what's wrong with this guy? Why is this guy crying, right? Yeah. But I started just crying and bawling, and I had this huge realization that, you know, the world is so much better when you look at everything through love, right? Through love, companionship, kindness, being genuine, you know, and it dawned on to me, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's what life is about. It's helping other people, what you can do for your community, how you can inspire and empower those around you, right? Because, like, I know you and I have this conversation about how, like, this new generation is very lost, right? There's not strong leadership. There's no more, how do I say it? The fatherhood of a young man coming up and growing up is really not there anymore, right? And it's really sad. And it's really sad because I feel like the youth is the future, and there's not so many role models out here for this youth, right? So that after that experience, it made me really realize how important now my job as a barber is, because we barbers definitely have the power and influence to help the youth. Because when someone sits in our chair, right? Like when you sit in my chair, even though you didn't know me, you're giving me your trust already without knowing me. So that alone is already, you're already allowing me to influence you, right? Because you're already trusting, right? Trust is influence, right? So after that experience, I realized, like, dude, like, barbering is just not barbering. You have the ability to help someone out through the conversations that you have while you're servicing them, right? Not only am I making people feel good with the haircuts, I'm also having a meaningful conversation, right? Where my clients get up and leave and think like, whoa, okay, like this guy really opened my eyes to certain things that I didn't see, right? And then at the same time, I learn from my clients, right? They teach me a lot based off their experiences, their stories, what they have gone through, right? I've definitely learned a lot from you, you know? And I think that's just the beauty of what barbering is nowadays. It's just, it's more than just a haircut, you know? It's an experience. It's how can we help each other get better. So I feel like everything just kind of tied back down to like our encounter, and then going and experiencing the micro hike. And it's been good all the way around, you know? But yeah, man, I thank you for that experience, and I thank you for, you know, the insight that you brought with how beneficial a lot of those things are for people that do face those things, right? Anxiety, depression, because a lot of people, their anxiety is really bad, right? So especially social anxiety, and I ask you, do you recommend, or how would you go about recommending this to other people that are kind of skeptical?
Yeah, you know, what I would tell people first of all is, if you're interested in psychedelics, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to know. I focus primarily on psilocybin and mushrooms, and that's what I would consider myself an advocate for. I'm not necessarily an advocate for any of the other psychedelics. Not that I'm against them per se, but I don't feel like I know as much, and I haven't seen as much positive benefit for myself or heard enough stories from other people about how it benefited. I have heard some scattered things about ayahuasca and LSD and acid, and people, you know, even ketamine for some people, you know, having good experiences. But psilocybin, I know for myself, has been beneficial, and I've heard so many, like countless stories now of people, and I've done.
What is that exactly? I don't know
Psilocybin?
Yeah, what is that?
So psilocybin is the name of the active ingredient, like in magic mushrooms.
Okay.
So that you would say psilocybin. And actually, there's even another compound called psilocin that psilocybin gets broken down into. And I think it actually might be psilocin that ends up being the thing that causes you to have the experience. But it's in the psilocybin form when it's in the mushroom. And it doesn't become psilocin. Actually, I think there can be some of it is already broken down in the mushroom, but for the most part, it's psilocybin in the mushroom, and then your stomach will break it down into psilocin. And that's generally what's considered to be the thing that gives you the experience. It gets more complicated even than that too, because people talk about other potential compounds that may be in the mushroom that could affect the quality of the experience too. We don't know. We just know that psilocybin has the strongest, most obvious effects. What I would tell people is like, look into it yourself. Like try to get some information from wherever you find your information, and try to understand like what does science say and what does it know about psilocybin. And if you look into it, you'll find that for the most part, studies that have been done more recently show that it's quite low risk, especially compared to alternative psychiatric type medications you might take.
No, definitely.
And is shockingly effective for things like addiction, for people who have struggled with anxiety or depression their whole lives. I don't want to claim the majority of them see a huge benefit but it's a significant enough number to really, I think, should be turning a lot of heads. But like I would also say, these substances are still illegal.
Yeah.
And unless you have a close friend or a really trusted connection that would help you obtain it, I wouldn't say to go out seeking it. Really, truthfully, it's not worth it, because you know, right? It's like you have to put yourself in a certain amount of danger to go find someone who might be selling, and you know, if you're just completely, if it's completely unknown and you have no easy way of obtaining it, I wouldn't suggest that. There are now places in Colorado, in Oregon, where you can go and you can have a guided kind of, or at least supported kind of experience with these compounds. You can do it under the supervision of someone who's been trained to do it, and in an environment that's perfectly controlled and safe. And because there are other external variables when people do mushrooms, or maybe even any substance that is psychoactive, where if you take mushrooms and you're out on the town, and like now all of a sudden you're in a completely different state of consciousness. You could be in a very vulnerable state.
Yeah, no, 100%.
It's worth being cautious around, but do some of your own research, and I think that you'll find that it's showing very, very promising signs. For people that I know, and for people that are close to me, and people who would trust me, I can help people get mushrooms, and I can, I prefer to recommend people who want to have especially a larger experience. The microdosing is one thing, but if you're looking for a more potentially transformative experience for mushrooms, you would have to take a higher dose. And I'm not really in a place yet where I feel extremely comfortable giving people the mushrooms to do that. I mean, for very, very close friends, especially friends who have had experiences with psychedelics before, of course I would do it. They would be considered experience. I'm not introducing this completely new thing to them. But I'd recommend people look into Odyssey out in Oregon. I attended their retreat earlier this year, and
that's right, huh?
I feel like they're doing really, really good work. The biggest downside with doing it through the current system is that it can be quite cost prohibitive for people. It costs thousands of dollars to go and do it with people, because you're paying for room and board. You're there for 4 or 5 days. All your food's paid for. It's all included, right? And the professionals who are dedicating their time to this, they have to get paid, and usually there's multiple people involved, and so it's difficult to do it inexpensively. Even though mushrooms themselves, they kind of grow. They just grow out of the ground. Yeah. They're not that hard to make. And for those who are really, really interested, you could go down the rabbit hole of learning how to grow for yourself. And that would probably be the overall best way for someone who is new and who is really committed, because then that it's the source is good. It's not contaminated unless you unintentionally contaminate it. But there's a lot of resources online. It's free to buy spores. It's legal to buy spores. So you can buy them and you can grow them. If you grow too much of them, you might attract the attention of the authorities or something. But if you're just growing them for yourself and you're keeping it contained somewhere, it's probably fine. You're going to be okay. And then you just have to learn what's involved for that. And it's not extremely difficult, but it's a DIY project,
Not definitely.
So those are kind of the different avenues right now that I would advise people for. Yeah.
So some people are probably going to watch this and they're asking themselves, right? Like, I know I would ask myself, right, if I consider myself an addict or dealing with PTSD or depression, like what exactly happens in the process of taking mushrooms that helps you with those things? Like what do you, from your experience or people that you've been around, what happens in the process that gets them to be like, oh shit, I'm no longer going to be addicted to this?
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
It's a great question. I'll start by saying that for those who've experienced mushrooms, there's a mysterious quality to it, meaning that it's difficult to completely put your finger on what's changing, and even what we know from studies and what science can show. I mean, we don't have a super clear picture of exactly what the transformative mechanism is. I can speak from my experience of how it felt and what the outcome I feel like was. I can talk about those things. But what I believe is, I think it comes down to like two main things. One is what I would describe as a personality dimension. So for people who are not familiar, there's something called the Big Five personality scale, which includes 5 traits. If I can remember them off the top of my head, it's openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, introversion and extroversion, and agreeableness and disagreeableness. So those are the 5 dimensions you could be high or low on any of those things, if that makes sense. So, and each of those dimensions has their own description. This is a model of personality. So conscientiousness would be like someone who's very responsible. If you're high in conscientiousness, you're very responsible, you're very detail-oriented. If you're neurotic, you're high in negative emotion. You experience a lot of anxiety. You experience maybe a lot of sadness, or just you're prone to that. Most people would prefer to be low in neuroticism. Agreeableness is being oriented towards helping others, or being at peace with others, or looking out for others before yourself, versus disagreeableness is being generally putting yourself first, being comfortable with conflict, etc. So, that's a whole thing. But openness is a dimension in there, and studies that have been done using that as like a way of measuring personality change have seen that there's a 1 standard deviation increase in openness from people before and after they do a therapeutic experience with psilocybin. So I think a lot about the idea of openness. Like, what does openness really mean, right? Like, openness, at least in that model, openness is associated with an interest in ideas, interest in aesthetics, art, beauty, and also just, generally having a not a fixed mindset about things, right? Like being open to new things, to new habits. So there's something with, that psychological trait of openness that seems probably to be tied into the other side of the equation, which is the actual brain change, or, what's happening physiologically in your brain. And people talk about this idea of neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to form new connections. In some ways, potentially even like regenerate, like if it's a connection that has deteriorated, or if it's a connection that's never been formed before. Psilocybin is thought to increase neuroplasticity, and I think that ties directly to this psychological trait of openness that people then feel, or they display it, I guess. Other people would say that person seems like they're generally more open, and that person's experience. I know certainly my experience. I had a lot of beliefs about myself or about life that I kind of, I didn't necessarily change my mind on them entirely, but they were brought up for reevaluation, and I thought about myself as someone who was planning on becoming a computer engineer, software developer. I thought I was like a tech guy, and I have a lot of skills in that arena. But my experience with psilocybin showed me like, well, I have this interest in technology. I've gained a lot of skills in it, but ultimately, what brought me there was my love of video games. My love of video games came from my love of spending time with friends, family members, cousins, brothers, whatever, playing the games and connecting, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what started my love for the games. And then once I loved video games and I wanted to play more and I wanted to play it in, novel ways, I started learning about computers. And it was like, it kind of connected all the dots in that and made me realize, like, even in my work, working with computers, the things I found most meaningful were when I was able to help someone else with the issue that they were having with their computer, their technology, whatever it was, right? It wasn't like, there was a part of me that enjoyed creating some of the creative projects that I worked on where I was building things with software, but really, like, whenever someone needed my help and didn't understand something, like I loved being the person who could jump in and help explain it or help them solve it and get them going again, and so it allowed me to kind of like open my perspective. Like I've been going on this track towards being a software engineer, but I've been having second thoughts about it, and it gave me a place to start on like a new path. Like I was like, okay, even if I need to make money and I'm not ready to leave the tech industry, I've invested all this time and money into getting a computer engineering degree. I want to do something within that where I'm like connecting with people more. So I went into like support. I went from being a software developer, or I should say a trained software engineer who had some experience developing software, to go into support, which many people would consider that a step down because it's like, it's not nearly as prestigious to be like tech support, right? Well, believe it or not, a year later after I decided to go into support, I ended up working for Google as a solutions engineer, which is kind of a fancy name for a support engineer, but in a role that I didn't even know existed before. So it was kind of like I actually was more in alignment, I think, with my true nature and what really motivated me. It's not like I feel like I found the perfect career, but it was still I felt so much more motivated towards that than the way I was feeling about my current path at the time. That's like one example. Another example would be I grew up playing piano, and I never felt like I was that musically talented. Like I had a lot of piano training, but it always felt like it kind of came difficult to me. And I remember being young and thinking, oh, it'd be so cool to be able to sing really well, but my voice isn't good. I could never sing. When you record yourself, you like, oh, I hate how I sound. And so I just like kind of ruled that out entirely. And then my first major experience with mushrooms, I just thought like, why did I ever decide that? Why did I ever like give myself that limiting belief in the first place? Like I never really tried. I never really put effort or work into training myself to sing. Of course, with piano, I did try, but it was also always externally motivated. It was never myself who really wanted it. So I decided to start practicing and playing piano again and doing it my way and just doing it on my own terms, and then just singing more and just practicing, training my voice. And it's been 5 or 6 years since I've done that. And I'm really happy now with like the result that like, oh, I can sing and it's something that I love to do. And would I have ever decided to do that without mushrooms? I don't know. I probably not, So, it's things like that. There's plenty that I could talk about, but that was like my subjective experience and kind of some ways in which my life changed. But a lot of people seem to report generally, I think there's this idea of like the unknown and fear of the unknown and how anxiety is tied in with that. And the ability to encounter novel things and instead of seeing them as threatening, seeing them as exciting or like an adventure, and dealing with the internal turmoil and the stress and the anxiety, being able to deal with that better, and it gave me a lot of insight into like how my own fear worked and the things I was afraid of, and how those were actually potential areas for growth for me. And I was like, no, I need to actually focus on these things, and I need to confront the fear, and I need to, it's holding me back from my full expression as a human being, and it really taught me that. And then I started learning ways without mushrooms, like meditation and stuff, to start dealing with more of my anxiety, and breathing exercises, for example. Like when I go somewhere, if I feel like I'm getting overstimulated socially or otherwise, I'll just take some deep breaths. And then all of a sudden I feel okay. And I'm not, it doesn't affect my ability to talk to people anymore. It doesn't affect, so there's a lot of really cool things that have come out of it. And so there is this like stress reduction piece, or the ability to handle some of those emotions better that I think people get, that's coupled with the openness. So there could be even more than that, because, a lot of people report feeling cravings related to, substances that they used to have like very dependent relationships on. They feel like those cravings kind of dissipate, and they're more aware of their relationship with the substance and like how it could be actually not so good. And it motivates people generally to want to quit. I mean, ever since I've, got, started using mushrooms, and I've even started limiting my own use of mushrooms in certain ways too. But it's motivated me to completely clean up my life as far as like the things that I eat, the substances I take. I don't. It's fun. I'm almost like very. How would I even say it? Like, it's not OCD, because it's not compulsive, but like I've been excited by the prospect of like just not being dependent on anything. Like I don't have to drink caffeine to work. I don't have to, I don't really need anything to function and feel my best 99% of the time. And mushrooms have been like a tool that I use to kind of get there. And I think it's just cool to be like, yeah, like how awesome is it to just be in your own body, in your own in your own power, and not rely on especially to rely on a pharmaceutical, but like anything that you might feel like you need to live your life, right? So.
And that ultimately comes back down to having power, right? Power over yourself, over your actions, over the things that would have power over you, right? And I think that's what makes it the most satisfying, right? The fact that you said right now is like, I like feeling that I don't have to rely on certain substances or certain things to get me going to function, right? And that ties back down to a lot of why even people get addicted to certain things, right? Because they're going through a hard time in their life, or they're going through trauma or anxiety, right? I know a lot of people that smoke weed because they deal with their anxiety, social anxiety, whatever. And like you were saying, I think mushrooms really helped you understand, hey, like it gave you a different point of view of ultimately your beliefs, your behaviors, why you do things, why you don't do things. And I think it comes back down to like what you were saying, right? It puts you in this open mode or place, right? Where it makes you better understand. And I feel like that's exactly what it did to me, right? It put me in this place where I allowed myself to feel, right? I allowed myself to feel. And I know a lot of people numb from feeling just because of the pain that comes with feeling, right? The like you're saying, the unknown. People numb a lot of their emotions, but I tell people, right, when you suppress something, eventually it's gonna blow.
Exactly.
And when it blows in so many ways. Like you might have a little, how do I say it? You might go off on somebody, right? Because that person hits your last straw, and you just go off on them, and like, damn, bro, why you coming at me like that? But they don't know the reality that you've been suppressing your feelings for the longest time.
Yeah, exactly.
And just hearing you talk about your experience with it and how just those two experiences that you shared with the limiting belief with your piano and your singing, right? And the first one was about, what was the first one about? It was
more about like really just the fear of the unknown and making a career pivot. I was already starting to feel like I wanted to make a pivot, and I was kind of despairing about like a life where I'm just a computer programmer and I'm kind of isolated, and so it gave me the insight to say, well, you don't have to necessarily throw this away entirely, because as long as you feel like you're helping people somehow, it'll be more meaningful. And that was true. And not only was that true as I felt better doing my work in some ways, but also like I was better at it. Like because I guess I have an interest in people in a way that, like, I don't know, like maybe some other software engineers don't care to have to interact with people and work with customers and deal with like the BS that comes with that. And like, for me, it's like my reason for solving the problem is because I believe it's going to help the other person, or it's something that they desire, something that they need my help. You know, I feel
See,
important.
And I love that, and I love that, right? Because going right, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of just everyone, right? They're doing a job that they necessarily don't enjoy doing. They become miserable, right? They don't understand where to find happiness, right? And I think I uncovered a little bit of what you were saying right now about you weren't feeling satisfied, you weren't feeling motivated to show up to work and do the work, right? And ultimately it came back down to helping, right? Helping people. And that's another thing that I tell a lot of my clients, like, look, when you put yourself in a position where you can help someone, it might be opening the door, I don't know, just small acts, right? The feeling that you get from that is very powerful. It's a lot more powerful than having a good status job. You're making good money, but then you're miserable, right? You're miserable. And it seems like to you, like you're saying, like in the corporate world, right? The status world, it seemed kind of like a support tech, right? It's kind of like a step down, but you were willing to take that because you realize how much more satisfaction came from helping people than to be over here and just making a little bit more money, right?
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, it's not about the money, it's about the impact that you can make, right? So I like that. I like that fact that you had that realization that, hey, my happiness really came down to helping other people, right? And then not limiting yourself to certain things, right? And a lot of people, so many people limit themselves, right? We're humans, right? We could do crazy things. So yeah, man, I love that. I love that story that you shared right there. And I feel a lot of people can definitely benefit from that, right? Because a lot of people don't understand why they feel unhappy, why they're having addictions, why they can't give up bad habits. And I feel like if people were to really take the time and effort to realize, why am I this way, you know? And like you say, I feel like mushrooms do a really good job on kind of unlocking those.
Yeah, and maybe part of what it also does, I've heard it said this way, is that it minimizes, it shrinks the barrier between your subconscious and your conscious mind. So that would mean, typically the emotions are associated a lot with like the subconscious. Like you could have emotions that you're not feeling because they're trapped subconsciously. And so, but they're still affecting you, whether you realize it or not. They're what's leading to a lot of your self-destructive behavior, or your addictions, whatever, your inability to connect with other people, whatever it might be. And so yeah, it can kind of bring that more to the forefront and help you gain awareness. That's for sure it can do that. I guess I should also speak a little bit on the addiction side of things too, because addiction is like, it's not just about substances, it's also about like habits that you have, which you might, part of you feels like, man, this really isn't that great for me. I should be spending my time other ways, or like, it maybe has these negative side effects that are not so great, but like you get a certain amount of pleasure or joy from it, so you kind of keep doing it. But I don't know, I had ended up in a place where I was at conflict with myself a little bit over my use of cannabis, for example. I didn't think of it as a huge problem, but I had enough awareness before I did mushrooms to go like, yeah, maybe this isn't so good. I don't know, but I like it, like. And then another thing would be my like obsession with video games for a lot of my life. From a very young age, I was obsessed with games. I spent a lot of time playing video games, and I never even really thought that much about why. I just knew that when I was playing games, I felt good. Like for me, it put me in a place that I wasn't feeling anxious. I wasn't feeling sad. I was just focused on what I was doing, And and it felt meaningful for one reason or another. Maybe because the story was captivating, or because I was playing with my siblings and we were competing or collaborating, and like that was, there was a lot there that felt good. But the problem was that like with the amount of time I was spending with the games, I was not spending enough time in reality with my loved ones and with my friends, and like a lot of my friendships were just based around video games and not much more. And again, most of my life, I was aware of that sort of disparity that you might say, but never motivated enough to like stop playing games. And it was after my mushroom experience where it was like I saw it so clearly. I was like, wow, like I cannot deny the degree to which I'm kind of. Really, it was the cannabis and the cannabis and the video games combined. I saw both of those things as like I'm allocating too much of myself to this, and it's harming the more holistic health of my life, and my future even, and like my ability to be successful, and like a lot of that kind of stuff. And so it motivated me to stop smoking cannabis, although that was also somewhat aided by a chronic pain condition that I developed as a sophomore. And I took mushrooms when I was a senior. And that chronic pain condition I should talk about, because it's probably what initially pushed me down the road of trying mushrooms at all in the first place. Because I was a pretty straight edge kid for the most part. I did get into cannabis, but at my school in California, even the straight edge kids were smoking weed, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So I was not that much of a risk taker, but the chronic pain that I had was not getting diagnosed. The prognosis was not great. It was starting to look like this might be something I have to deal with the rest of my life. And that was kind of one of my lowest lows at my life at that point. So I think I took the mushrooms almost in more of like a fuck it kind of way. I didn't know anything about what mushrooms could really do. I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to help my depression. No, I got kind of lucky in a sense, because I took it with close friends and it was in a safe environment. Nothing bad happened. And I felt like a lot of the positive benefits came after. But I really thought a lot about how much I wanted to be spending my life getting high, playing video games, when like, there's meaningful things for me to be doing that are better than that. And I wanted to aspire to more, and like it was so pivotal there. And this brings me in kind of to like one of the other subjects I want to talk about, which is the concept of flow and flow state. And thanks to people like John Vervaeke and now a writer named Stephen Kotler, I've learned a lot about flow. And I made the connection at some point listening to one of John Vervaeke's lectures. He's a cognitive scientist at University of Toronto, about how flow, or I should say, video games are known to be one of the most effective means for like bringing people into a flow state. And what is a flow state? Well, flow state is what athletes talk about when they say that they're in the zone, or when people are watching them play and say, oh, that guy's in the zone. Someone's in the zone, or you yourself can know you're in the zone when you are in a place where you're engaging in some kind of activity that requires you to exert like a certain amount of effort and skill, right? But also you're performing really, really well, but it also feels easy. Like there's this ease associated with it, but you're also like, you're even doing things that you've never even really done before. Like athletes, in order to play at the highest level, have to be able to get into flow basically every single game. If they're not getting into flow in the game, they're not having a good game, right? And I learned that my experience of video games was really an experience of flow, and that's what I was loving about the games. It wasn't actually something that was exclusive to the games, but for me, the games became one of the only areas I was able to really experience it. And I didn't really realize that's what was going on. And it turns out that people who play a lot of video games, young men who play games, unfortunately find it really difficult to get into flow elsewhere in their life.
No way.
And that's what was going on, like, the whole time. Is it's like, and I had moments in my life that I look back on that were not in the video game realm, where I was getting into flow, and I can remember it. I can think that moment was really significant, like when I was wrestling. Mostly it was in sports. Occasionally it would be, probably when you're a kid, when you're young, you do a lot of like make pretend play, and like there were moments there, but that was very young, and I can't remember that all so well. But I decided as a result of that I think I need to see what my life is like if I just stop playing video games, and like really see like how much can I attain flow in everything else, right? Instead of that. And so there's flow when you're in conversation, there's flow when you're socializing and you're meeting new people, and you can just kind of like, go off the cuff. And I felt I was so bad at that for so long as a kid, and now it all just kind of makes sense. My brain was not getting into flow, and then I wondered why was it so hard to talk to new people, and so I've focused a lot now on flow. I think it's really a key piece for many reasons, and flow is enjoyable because you really are, in a sense, in an optimal brain state where you're fully present. You're not anxious because you're not thinking about the future. You're not depressed because you're not thinking about the past, and you're productive and you're creative, and people. Time and time again, when you assess people who've had a flow experience, like they always report like feeling like that was a really, really not pleasurable. They don't tend to use those words. They tend to describe it as a meaningful thing, but also they did feel good. And I've gotten really interested in figuring out, okay, first of all, for myself, how do I get flow? When I'm doing my job, that's, I would love to be in flow when I'm doing the job, the thing that makes me money, but flow when I'm out and about and I'm just living my life and I'm meeting new people, or when I'm playing music, and like going on a hike. Like I wanted to know how I could get a generalized effect that would increase my flow across the board. And that's why I've studied under Stephen Kotler's Flow Research Collective program to train myself. And there's a lot of habits that are involved that I started building into my life, and things that I've done that have, for the most part, been very effective. And also, I'm interested in kind of bringing some of that knowledge and helping other people do the same thing. And I actually think that psychedelics could be a really key tool in there, in doing that, especially for people maybe like as a catalyst, kind of like how it was for me. Like early on, I took mushrooms, and then it opened me up to all these other domains of things that I could like start spending more time doing. And as I gained skill and I spent more and more time, I started getting more into flow with those. But like the mushrooms themselves were like the thing that kind of set me on the path. And then there are like, now I do a lot of things on the daily basis that are just behaviors. Which I know work to help me get into flow more, and I don't need to use mushrooms. I don't need to use anything necessarily to do it. So there's so much tied in with flow and depression and anxiety. Like some people would call depression anti-flow, and there's a lot that could be said around that. I think that it's one of the major pieces in the puzzle in the mental health epidemic. And the problem is, once you're depressed, once you're anxious, it's also way more difficult to get into flow at all. So the thing that would help you feel better becomes almost unreachable, depending on how bad your psychological state is, which is why I think having some kind of external agent like psilocybin makes a lot of sense. So, yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's beautiful too, because if you really think about it, right, everything is correlated, right? Everything that you experience, you could tie it back down to the initial experience, right? Of how you got into the state. And it's almost like now that you're getting into the flow and learning flow, and a lot of people don't even know what flow is, right?
We don't have the language for it, really.
What the hell is flow, right?
Yeah.
And going back to what you're saying about the video game thing, right? Why a lot of young men are addicted to video games, because it does put you in that state where you're you're leveling up, you're meeting your goals, you're
Exactly.
focused, right? And those are the things that we should be doing outside of video games into our real lives that bring that purpose, that drive, that ambition, which then it cures the depression, right? It cures the anxiety because you're present and you know where you're going. And going back to what you were saying, this is why mental health is really, really, how would you say, it's like an epidemic, right? Like the suicide rates are going higher. People are no longer communicating with one another. It's crazy, man. Like I see it. I see it every day. My clients come in and you can just see it. You know, they're like, dude, I'm going through a hard time, and because a lot of people are living in the future or living in the past, and they're not realizing what they have in front of you. So now I ask you, someone that doesn't know what flow is, how would you tell someone to get into flow? Like, what are some of the things that you do that allow you to get into flow? And when do you use it? When do you find yourself like, I need to get into flow right now?
Yeah, well, so probably first and foremost is this idea of attention and focus. So in our society, in modern society, our attention is being dragged in a million directions all the time because of television and our phones and just advertising and like all these things that are always vying for our attention. You know, people talk about the attention economy. That's what that's what social media and modern tech platforms are all based off of. It's like, you know, these things are free, but you're paying with your attention, right? And so there's a lot of incentive, financial incentive for people to pull your attention in a bunch of ways. And we don't really do ourselves any favors because we always are carrying our phone around. You know, the thing that we practically need, we use it to get from place to place. We use it to talk to people on the phone and text and communicate with like the people who actually are important to us in our lives. But then they also have all these other things built into them, which are like in some ways parasitical to sometimes what our real goals are, and they pull us away from what we really want to be doing. And I mean, I would attribute most of that to stuff like social media, but like, I mean, people have games on their phone and people, you know, like, and I know I love YouTube. It's been actually a really amazing educating platform for me, but there are times when, you know, I end up spending more time on it and watching kind of garbage content that I shouldn't be watching, because even YouTube has YouTube Shorts built in because they still want to get your attention, and that's how they make their money, right? So in order to be able to get into flow, you actually have to decide on a thing that you're doing, a goal, an activity, whatever it is, and just do that for an hour, hour and a half, maybe even longer. Like probably at least an hour and a half, I would say, before you have even a good chance of getting into flow. It doesn't just usually happen in 20 minutes. There are people who are so effective at getting into flow where they can do it really, really easily. You know, but it just, I guess it depends on the activity as well. Like, how stimulating is the activity? If it's like a boring activity, or even maybe I would say if it's like a creative activity, I think it takes a little bit longer. If it's a higher stimulation activity, you can kind of get into flow a little bit more easily, because it all comes back to dopamine. And but generally, like, minimizing the degree in which you context switch. So context switching is the idea of switching your attention from thing to thing. Trying to bring that down, the volume of context switching down in your life in general to the degree that it's possible, and getting more focus on singular things. That's one thing you can think about. You know, there's another piece to it too, which is just having more structure in your life, having more plans and planning ahead a little bit, and like planning your week or your month, putting things on a calendar and knowing what's important, knowing what's coming up, so that, you know, you're not just every day waking up and going, well, shit, like, what am I going to do today? I don't have any plans. And then, like, you just end up defaulting to, like, the lowest common denominator activity you could do, whatever's most immediately satisfying, which is almost always the phone. It's because it's always there. And you can watch YouTube, you can go on Instagram, you can, those platforms, in the same way like video games, they're designed to get you into a flow-like experience as well. that's why people do them. That's what because it turns off the brain, they're not anxious, they're not depressed. But I would again use the word parasitical. It's like a parasitical type of flow, because just like video games, probably the more you're spending time on those platforms, the less you're having flow elsewhere. And you're not getting the things that are important to you are not being done, right? And so ultimately it's not to come down too hard on people who might believe that they get benefits from these platforms, because you very well may. There may be, valuable things you learn. You may get a good laugh, and laughter is good. Humor, like having some levity in your life. Like there are good things, but they're mixed in with some pretty, I think, damaging things. I mean, we know social media for younger kids, particularly girls, has had a really devastating effect on their psychology. And I don't just think that it comes down to, the whole like comparison thing and the social status and girls. Like that's a big part of it for sure. But no one talks about like what effect the use of the actual thing does to your brain and messes your ability to get into flow. And I mean, think about the ADHD thing too. It's not just depression. It's also like this idea of lacking motivation or like lacking focus and needing to take a medication to do it. It's like some people are born in such a way that it's very difficult for them to function in modern society and to focus, because their brain needs higher stimulation. But I think a lot of people have actually given themselves ADHD effectively by their habits and not being disciplined enough early on. And then once the habits are established, now it's like an addiction. So it's very, very hard to get out of. But I think there are much better answers than having to rely on medication like Adderall or Ritalin or something like that. So I hope I didn't go too far off track.
No, this is good information, because I feel like a lot of people don't even know, right? Yeah. They don't even know none of this stuff. They don't even know why they are the way they are. And I feel like this is a very good conversation that we're having, because you kind of go into a lot of the back end of people's addictions, right? People's lack of motivation, why people can't be focused, why people have ADHD, the cause of social media. And social media is very, very toxic, right? My use on social media is very limited. I don't have X, TikTok, none of that. The only thing I have is YouTube and Instagram. And even then it's like, dude, like you're on there and you're like, I need to get out of here, right?
You got to jump on, jump off.
Exactly. So this is very good information. This is I love it. This is the type of conversations, like I was telling y'all, that we have here, or that I have with my clients, is we talk about actual meaningful things. Like we're not just shooting the shit and talking about dumb stuff, right? It's actually very powerful, meaningful things, insights that could definitely help a lot of people that don't understand why am I so glued onto my phone, right? The other day I was talking to one of my clients. I was like, hey man, how's your brother? He's like, man, to be honest with you, I don't even know about that guy. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, this guy is glued to his phone. I talked to him and he's like, what'd you say? And he goes, what'd you say? Over and over and over again. Yeah. And it's like, people are starting to lose that face-to-face interactions, right? Like even when I go to the gym, right? I go to the gym and you just sit back and observe. Yeah. You see a lot of people are just at a machine looking at their phone. It's like, bro, you're working out, or you're working out your eyes, or what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? But again, I love this information. And, I know I've heard a little bit about flow early on, but I never really understood it, until like you're sharing how flow really does play a huge factor in a lot of people's life, right? And I know you say you got into a program, right? Mm-hmm. With the flow. What are your plans with that program? Why did you decide to do it? And
sure. Since I've been, a graduate with a bachelor's degree and working in technology, the tech field, I felt like I really made a good decision to move towards like the support kind of role, and I'm good at it, and I can make good money today, being a support engineer and working with software, because that's, there's a lot of money there, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, long term, I've really wanted to get more into a type of profession where I can actually be of benefit, directly to individuals with their life and their real problems and their psychological problems, probably primarily, but maybe some things more outside of that too, because everything's kind of connected. You know, your psychological problems can be a result of your diet. You know, it can be a result of your habit, your sedentary lifestyle. So it's like, I want to focus on the psychology and the emotions, but also like I've learned a lot about other areas too, in the ways that those can aid someone's mental health and stuff, right? So yeah, I was interested in flow for myself, selfishly, and then also as something that I could use as a framework for working with people and seeing, you know, like how much of a change can you really make for yourself in your life with not just like your goals and your success and your accomplishments, although all that is worth talking about, but just how you feel on the day-to-day basis. Like really, if you were at your 100% max potential for just feeling good and being motivated and being in your life and being able to show love and generosity to people that just in your interactions, like what is the max of that? And like, are you inspired to want to work towards that? And for the people who are inspired or who at least want something better than what they're currently at, like that's what I want to focus my time and energy on, you know? And so for me to be able to kind of put myself out there and get potential clients or people that I might work with, I thought it made a lot of sense to start making more content for people to view. And this is, you know, our plan is to put this primarily on YouTube, but also, you know, we're probably going to put, you know, some shorter form content to, you know, get some of the attention out there. And but ultimately, I like the idea of making longer form content. I like having podcasts where I can talk and connect with someone and share ideas. And then I also think there would be a place for me to make more like educational type videos too on the subject of flow or psychedelics or like the things that I would be potentially talking with one-on-one with someone who would be like a client that's seeking my coaching advice, right? So that's kind of where I'm going, and that's a big reason why we're doing this here today. And I don't know what that's going to look like fully, but I think I've learned a lot, you know. I think I've had a lot of my own major transformations, and I think I have some ideas that will really help people if people are open to them and willing to put in, you know, the effort and maybe if they're willing to try mushrooms at some point. I think I think that gives people a higher likelihood of success to make a big change too. So, you know, it's all kind of coming together over time, and I just figure this is just another way for me to move towards that goal. And so I would conceive of myself now currently as someone who's working towards being like a flow coach, basically. And that's what the program that I'm in is really all about. I also took a year-long program about psychedelics and you know, with a focus on how they might be used in a therapeutic way. You know, it's like but also it was like a very holistic training. I learned a lot about the history of them and different applications and you know, even like ancient traditions where they were used and stuff like that. But ultimately my focus in the short term is like, because I live in California and because it's difficult to really do psychedelic work above board, I'm focusing on the flow component. And so I'm trying to see like, okay, how much can I help people attain flow in their life with or without needing to use psychedelics? I think there will come a time when it will start making a lot of sense to incorporate more of the psychedelics. But for now, it's really just flow oriented, and that involves behavioral change, you know, incorporating new habits into your life. And even like there's some kind of like one-time changes that you can do. Like we categorize them as flow habits that you have to do every day versus a flow intervention. Some one time or potentially, you know, a few number of times thing that you would do that will just have a very large effect on your ability to get into flow. And it doesn't necessarily, like one example would be going from someone who has all these apps on your phone and all the notifications on to now what I've done is I've simplified my phone. I got rid of all the apps that I don't feel like are valuable to me. And I have turned off my notifications, which sounds kind of radical and crazy, but most of the time, any notification that comes through my phone is not going to be actually urgent. So why do I need to see it when I'm just trying to sit and hang out with my friend? And like, you know, I want to be present, you know, and So that's one of the like major interventions that I've done. There's plenty more there as well. So teaching people some of these things and educating them, and being along with them on the journey, and just being able to speak from my experience. And I think I might even also focus on people who have chronic pain. So I was thinking that I would be able to speak from my personal experience the most for people who, like, let's say, young men who play video games. That's definitely a demographic that I'm really interested in helping, and I think I'd be capable of helping. I don't always know how open to change those people will always be, but I have chronic pain, and I know how much flow has made a difference for that. Because flow, the experience of flow also, it doesn't cure pain, but it lessens the subjective experience of pain when you're in flow. And so flow has actually been a thing that's been a tool for me to deal with and manage my chronic pain over time. And people who have chronic pain, they're willing to do anything.
Yeah.
They want to make the change, right? They're feeling pain. They're actually, so that might actually be where I start first, is looking for people who have chronic pain. And I don't know how large that demographic really is, but I definitely can speak from experience, and I think those people could benefit a lot from it. So that's what's on my short-term agenda for now. Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm excited for you, man. I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from you, from the time that I met you to now. Every time we have interaction, you always give me a different perspective on a lot of things, right? You definitely gave me a better understanding of flow and a lot of the things that you do, right? Just by eliminating the notifications, right? Because that, again, going back to what you're saying, is grabbing your attention, right? So you're constantly getting your attention pulled by these notifications. You're disrupting yourself from even getting into flow at all, because you might be right now focused or thinking about something, and then notification, boom, you get distracted, right? So it
might be even something that ends up being emotionally triggering, and now you can't stop thinking about the thing.
And it changes it. There you go.
Changes
perfect,
your
beautiful.
day.
See, I didn't even see it like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I know you will do a good job in this area. I know you will, and this is part of the reason also too why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because I was like, let me get him on here before he blows up, and then also too as well, I feel like this is also a good gateway for you to kind of get the momentum going and to start doing more content for YouTube, because I honestly think you would kill it on YouTube, especially today and in today's age, just because of the mental, how do I say, epidemic that a lot of these young men are facing, right? A lot of these young men don't even want to go outside anymore. They just want to stay stuck inside and watch porn, play video games, eat junk food, smoke weed, and just DoorDash shit to their house. No one wants to go outside anymore, and that leads a lot of depression, right? Depression and all this other stuff. So I think your work that you're doing it's very meaningful and very helpful, and we all need people like you, and going back to based on the name of the barbershop, right? Benevolent, right? What we stand for is helping other people, right? And I think you really fall along the lines of helping other people. And you said it yourself, you find the most joy in helping people. And I think ultimately, that's everyone's purpose here in life, is to how can we help the next person next to us, right?
Right. Because how can I be a mentor for someone?
Exactly.
How can I help someone get through their day a little bit better? Whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yes, man. So I'm thankful for your work. I'm thankful for you, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to come out here and do this, because we're both busy individuals, and carving time to do this is obviously very meaningful, and I know people will definitely benefit from this. You gave a very good insights, right? And man, I'm excited for you. I'm excited. Would you want to say any more stuff before we kind of wrap up the podcast?
Well, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
That means really a lot, what you said. And I've enjoyed this. I would definitely love to do it again.
Oh, hell yeah, man. Me too.
I want to give you some credit too. Like, I was surprised. My experience getting my hair cut has been completely different in my life. ever since I started coming to get my hair cut by you.
Yeah.
Like, I think I always thought of my haircut in somewhat like more of a transactional way of like, this is just something I need to do. I didn't really have like, I mean, of course I wanted my hair to look good, but I didn't think of it as like, oh, my haircut could actually be something I look forward to or something. It was just like, okay, well, I need to get my hair cut so it looks fine and I don't look weird, right? But like, I think it's some credit to you for like how you are as a barber and how open you are and how much you try to really engage and listen to, your customers and that was just super cool. So I want to say that Ed's a great guy and I really recommend getting your hair cut by him. Not only will he do it well, but also like you'll feel great during the hour. You know, it won't just be like, oh, I'm just here and I'm just counting the seconds. Like, no, he's a great conversationalist and great dude, and I really respect you, Ed.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
I appreciate
honestly, I do appreciate that. You know, and that's going. Just want to chime in a little bit, going back to what you were saying, right? And the thing that it changed for me too was prior to the pandemic, I never saw barbering the way I see it now, right? It was just more like you were saying, a transaction, right? Transactional. Well, okay, what do you want? Boom. Okay, cool. Later, right? But I was so unhappy. I was very unfulfilled. It was almost like the pandemic happened. Obviously, it wasn't a great thing, but it was almost like a blessing in disguise. But because what had happened was that for the first time in my life, since I started cutting hair, I took a long break from cutting hair, right? And what made me realize was how much I actually missed it. But then I remember how miserable I was doing it. So then I asked myself, how can I come back to cutting hair, because I love cutting hair, but how can I incorporate a factor into it where I'm, again, motivated, excited to show up?
Yeah.
And then it just, the idea sparked in me. I was like, what if I build relationships? What if I actually take the time to hear what my client is going through, hear what my client has on his mind, because we can all learn from everybody.
Sure.
Pandemic was over, got back into the barbershop, and from then took a different approach to it, and it has led me here, It has led me to constantly attract interesting people, just like you, Shout out to Christian again for allowing you to come here. But yeah, man, I'm really excited about this, and I hope we could do this in the future, and I hope we could see where you're going to be in the next couple of months. I know this year's going to be a great one, so I'm excited. And then maybe in the future we could go on and talk a little about more different topics, because I know you have a lot of
there's a million things.
I know you have a very interesting point of view on a lot of things, and I love it, man, because these are the type of conversations that I really enjoy dabbling into and exploring and just kind of asking questions about. And yeah, man, I love it. But yeah, thank you again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Ed. This was sweet.
Well, yeah, man.
Let's do it again soon.
Thank you again, man. Yes, sir.